on World News Tonight. Flash floods. Severe weather devastates India as the death tolls and number of missing persons continue to rise. Money trouble. Ron Desantis' campaign continues to falter as he encounters surmounting money troubles. Done deal. North Korea sends weapons to Russia following the closely observed Kim-Putin summit. Adorable rescue. Animals Lebanon rescues adorable land cats from the wrath of security forces in northern Lebanon.
This is Ada Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here's Winoja De Silva.
A very good evening and thank you for joining us on World News. We begin today with grim updates from India. At least 19 are killed and more than 100 people are missing in India's northeast after heavy rain caused a glacial lake to burst, leading to flash floods, which ripped through the Himalayan state of Sikkim.
Ice-cold floodwaters swept through mountain towns in India's Himalayan northeast, killing at least 19 people and leaving another 100 missing, washing away houses and bridges and forcing thousands of people to leave their homes. The Indian Army said in a statement that a sudden cloudburst over Lohak Lake in the northern part of India sent fast-moving torrents of water surging down the Teesta River in Sikkim's Lakshan Valley, raising water levels 15 to 20 feet higher than normal. Drinking water suppliers and sewage treatment plants have also been totally damaged across affected districts. Video from the north of the state shows a muddy deluge rapidly overflowing the river and flooded houses caked in dirt and debris, while images show search teams using excavators to uncover army vehicles buried deep in the mud. The Bangladeshi government said that rescue and restoration operations are underway with both state and national disaster personnel involved. Known as the rooftop of the world, the ecologically sensitive Himalayan region is prone to flash floods and landslides, and flooding is not unusual in Sikkim. But scientists are clear that extreme weather is becoming more frequent and more intense as the human-caused climate crisis accelerates.
Bangladesh has received the first Russian shipment of uranium fuel for its first nuclear power plant, making it the 33rd country in the world to produce nuclear energy.
Bangladesh is building the first of two nuclear power plants in collaboration with Russian state-owned atomic company Rosatom. 90% of the $12.65 billion project is financed through a Russian loan, repayable within 28 years with a 10-year grace period. Russian President Vladimir Putin also thanked the International Atomic Energy Agency for supervising the project, which resulted from a bilateral agreement in 2011. Completion of the Rupur plant, located around 200 kilometers west of the capital Dhaka, has been revised several times due to construction being delayed because of COVID-19 pandemic restrictions and the sanctions on Moscow following its invasion of Ukraine. The first unit of the plant, with a total generation capacity of 2,400 megawatts, was due to start operation in July next year, but that has been set back. Last month, Sergei Lavrov, the first Russian foreign minister to visit Bangladesh since its 1971 independence, assured Bangladesh that Moscow was committed to completing the project on time, despite obstacles from Western sanctions over the war in Ukraine. Electricity generation in Bangladesh is currently dependent on imported gas, which has risen sharply in price since Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Over in the US, a US fighter jet has shot down a Turkish drone in northeastern Syria. The Pentagon described it as a regrettable incident that comes at a time of increased tensions between the NATO allies.
The U.S. on Thursday said it shot down an armed Turkish drone that was operating near its troops in Syria, the first time Washington has brought down an aircraft of a NATO ally. Here's Pentagon Press Secretary Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder.
U.S. commanders assessed that the UAV, which was now less than a half a kilometer from U.S. forces, to be a potential threat, and U.S. F-16 fighters subsequently shot down the UAV in self-defense at approximately 11:40 local time. It's important to point out that no U.S. forces were injured during the incident. We have no indication that Turkey was intentionally targeting U.S. forces. Turkey is one of our strongest and most valued NATO allies, and that partnership continues and will continue. So this is certainly a regrettable incident.
This video showed smoke rising from various sites thought to have been targeted by Turkey in a Kurdish-controlled region. A Turkish Defense Ministry official said the drone shot down by the coalition did not belong to the Turkish armed forces, without saying whose property it was. U.S. support for Kurdish forces in northern Syria has long caused tension with NATO ally Turkey, which views them as a wing of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, the group which claimed Sunday's attack in Ankara near government buildings. Separately, aerial footage released by Turkey's National Intelligence Agency on Thursday showed various drone attacks on what it said were Kurdish targets in Syria. It could not independently verify the claim, location, and date the videos were shot.
Moving on to updates on Ukraine-Russia conflict. A Russian strike killed at least 51 people gathered for a wake in an eastern Ukrainian village. This provoked a wave of outrage from Western leaders for what a UN official called a horrifying attack.
Amidst the smoke and rubble, Ukrainian emergency workers strive to rescue and recover the victims of Russia's latest attack. On Thursday, the Ukrainian village of Hroza was devastated by a Russian strike, which killed dozens of people, including a 6-year-old child. According to the regional governor, a shop was hit as well as a cafe where around 60 of the village's 330 inhabitants had gathered to pay their respects to a deceased villager. Minutes go by and the lifeless bodies pile up. Although Interior Minister Igor Klimenko said preliminary reports suggested the attack was caused by an Iskander missile, security services are still processing the scene.
На місці працюють прокурори та слідчі.
Prosecutors and investigators of the security services are working on the scene to analyze the debris and information about the victims and the type of weapons that were used for this attack. Criminal proceedings have been opened according to the Criminal Code of Ukraine.
Це порушення законів та звичаїв війни.
Moscow's latest strike is one of the deadliest since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February last year. An attack which drew vivid condemnation from the UN and by President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was in Spain for a European leaders' summit. Kyiv is categorical. This new Russian strike is proof that Ukraine needs to strengthen its anti-aircraft defense. Yet another appeal to its allies at a time when the Ukrainian cause is losing support in Western countries, particularly in the United States, an essential source of financial and military aid in resisting Russian forces.
For updates on the road to the White House. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign for president is running low on cash, with only $5 million in cash on hand for the primary. This comes as frontrunner former President Donald Trump has raked in tens of millions of dollars in donations.
Tonight, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign touting what it calls a significant third-quarter fundraising haul, $15 million.
I will be sworn in as the 47th president of these United States.
The DeSantis campaign saying the new cash should silence his naysayers. But beneath the headline, the numbers spell trouble for the man once considered the heir apparent to the MAGA mantle. The campaign only has $5 million in cash on hand that can actually be used in the primary. Donor rules require the rest to be left for the general election. But to get there, he'll have to get past Donald Trump, the runaway frontrunner in the GOP primary and a fundraising juggernaut.
But on the sanctimonious, as you know, I got him elected, but now he's a failed candidate. He failed. He went down like an injured bird out of the sky.
Boosted by the Republican voters' fury at the legal peril facing the former president, the Trump campaign says they raised $45 million in the third quarter, with nearly $36 million cash on hand for the primary, more than 7 times DeSantis' total.
Why is he raising that money, and where's that money going to? Isn't it going to a lot of lawyers?
Governor DeSantis' campaign is a flashing red warning light right now. It's hard to turn around a presidential campaign, especially this late.
At this point in the 2020 primary, Kamala Harris had $10 million on hand, double DeSantis' current cash, and she dropped out before the Iowa caucus. But for DeSantis, a critical lifeline. His super PAC Never Back Down is flush with cash and has been footing the bill for events and other expenses typically funded by the campaign, and testing the legal limits around coordination between super PACs and campaigns.
It doesn't work. I don't think you can get elected president of the United States just because a couple millionaires like you.
And now the Desantis team taking a critical step, flying in staffers from his Tallahassee headquarters to Iowa in an urgent effort to shore up support in the first-in-the-nation caucus state.
Hello, Iowa!
More than 3 months out before caucus goers have their say, a campaign dogged by donor woes for months, now facing renewed concerns about the power of its purse.
Welcome back. And less than a month after Putin met up with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, America reported that North Korea has begun transferring artillery to Russia. Meanwhile, the US is speeding up to aid Ukraine.
North Korea is reportedly providing Russia with weapons. A U.S. official told the American news channel that the move bolsters Russian President Vladimir Putin's forces some 20 months into their invasion of Ukraine. CBS called the North Korean support a possible culmination of the summit last month in Moscow when Kim Jong-un made a rare train trip to meet Putin in person. Putin implied after the summit that he and Kim had discussed military cooperation, and CBS said to at least some degree the cooperation appeared to be taking shape this week. The news outlet, however, added that it's unclear whether the artillery transfer is part of a new long-term supply chain or a more limited consignment. It is also unclear what North Korea is getting in return for the weapons. Meanwhile, the White House has strongly condemned Russia for Thursday's attack on civilians in eastern Ukraine. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said it's horrifying if you go to grocery stores with your kids, an explosion happens and bodies are everywhere.
This is, again, what the president keeps talking about over and over again. We have to continue to support the people of Ukraine because this is the horrifying nature that they live in every day.
The press secretary added that President Biden will give a major speech on continuing to support Ukraine, possibly without going through Congress. The announcement comes as U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's removal from his role makes it challenging for Congress to debate over future U.S. support for Ukraine.
As Japan begins releasing the second batch of Fukushima wastewater, the international community addressed the issue at the International Maritime Organization, once again stressing that the release meets international standards.
International opinion remains divided over the Fukushima wastewater discharge. South Korea's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries said during a meeting at the International Maritime Organization on Thursday that the first discharge of treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant met international standards. During the meeting to discuss the London Convention and Protocol, which prohibits the dumping at sea of certain hazardous materials, South Korea emphasized that the international community must continue working together to ensure that the Fukushima discharge does not affect marine life. It also requested the continued sharing of data with transparency. Other nations, however, were more critical of Japan. The representative from China lambasted the discharge and referred to it as a selfish and irresponsible act, calling for in-depth discussions on whether it falls under what the London Convention and the Protocol sees as the dumping of hazardous materials. The Russian representative also said that Moscow views the discharge as a violation of the Convention and the Protocol. The U.S. representative, however, strongly supported Japan, urging the other nations to rely on science and not to spread false information. The U.S. representative also added that discussions regarding the discharge should be held at the International Atomic Energy Agency, not at the IMO. While Japan continued to reiterate its stance that the discharge complies with the Convention's regulations on marine dumping, no clear consensus was reached during the session.
Moving on to Morocco now. The global financial elite will gather for IMF and World Bank meetings next week in Morocco. But just an hour away from many Moroccans where they live in campsites after last month's deadly earthquake.
The global financial elite are due to meet in Morocco next week in conditions very different to those nearby. More than 10,000 are expected to attend the IMF and World Bank talks in Marrakesh, an hour from where locals were left homeless following last month's deadly earthquake. The nearby High Atlas Mountains were where most of the quake's 3,000 victims died. Here, villagers live in tents with little access to showers or working toilets and survive on state handouts. Omar lost his 2 sons in the disaster.
We lack water in these toilet taps. This is where pipes should have been connected. We have taps, but no water. It's the same in the other toilet cabins too. They are all the same. We have dirty showers, but no water.
The vivid contrast reflects inequalities in the country. Morocco has some of Africa's most advanced infrastructure and industry, but many of the rural poor live without basic services, including sewage systems. Issam lives in one of the hundreds of tents dotted around the town of Amizmis, with his wife and 6 children after their home collapsed.
The problem with tents is the heat. You wouldn't imagine how hot it feels. Our little children get sick. Some women had to take their children to the doctor because of the heat. It feels like a sauna.
Authorities have promised compensation for quake victims, including a monthly fee of $250 per household and thousands of dollars to rebuild fallen homes. They've distributed tents and blankets, set up field hospitals, and are removing rubble. The government said it plans to invest $12 billion in reconstruction and infrastructure over 5 years in the quake-ravaged region. As for Marrakesh, the popular tourist destination has already seen quake damage repaired or hidden ahead of the finance summit. Locals hope the conference will at least help bring back high-spending foreigners to the city's picturesque streets.
The summer brought scorching heat and the heaviest rain in 140 years to China, as the country is battling a growing food challenge.
From record rainfall to scorching heat, dramatic swings testing China's ability to cope with a changing climate. This summer, the heaviest rain in 140 years caused wide-scale flooding here that destroyed fields and tons of crops. The corn is soaked, the fields, the furniture. It's all garbage, he says. Last year, intense heat waves triggered the worst drought in decades. Climate change is feeding a quest to shore up China's food supply. Food security now a national priority for China's President Xi Jinping. To produce more and import less at a time when geopolitical tension is rising too. A campaign to expand farmland has reclaimed nearly 500,000 acres nationwide for staple foods like rice, soybeans, and wheat. It's all rice, this woman says, even in the local graveyard. In some places, parkland was bulldozed to make room for corn. Concerns over food security are deeply rooted here, with shortages sparking unrest during the pandemic. It has authorities fixated on food technology, too. Scientists are using indoor vertical farming and say they're harvesting more in half the time without disruptions from bad weather. An all-out push to feed a sense of security.
Welcome back. Typhoon Koinu heads for another province. For more on that story and more, let's take you around the world in a minute. Koinu, the 14th typhoon of this year, left China's Taiwan region and headed for its coastal province of Guangdong. And the province is on alert against its impact. According to French researchers, Western Europe's highest peak, Mont Blanc, has lost more than 2 meters in height over the past 2 years. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, is being sued by the US Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC is trying to compel him to testify as part of a probe into his $44 billion takeover of social media giant Twitter. Ventimiglia, an Italian city bordering France, continues to struggle with a surging number of refugees and illegal migrants. Italy is one of the main landing places for groups fleeing war-torn areas in Africa. Chile expressed outrage after being left out of plans for the 2030 World Cup, although neighboring Argentina, Uruguay and Paraguay were picked to host opening matches. That is all we have for you on World News tonight. If you missed any of today's programs, you can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Derana English. We are leaving you tonight in Beirut with 2 adorable lion cubs saved by the charity Animals Lebanon, once with no hope, but now with hearts and tummies filled. Thank you for watching and have a great weekend.